Good afternoon, and welcome to our latest Kansas Department of Commerce International Division webinar. My name is Jeff Willis, and I'm the International Division Director here at the Kansas Department of Commerce. We'll be recording today's session, and it will be available later on after the event on YouTube. Also, at any time during today's event, please use the chat box to ask any questions, and we'll attempt to address all the questions that we can at towards the end of the session. Well, today's session will be on website globalization. Even before the pandemic, a company's website was an important marketing tool describing what the company does and how to make contact. Now, after the onset of the pandemic and the move toward far greater use of virtual media, a company website is key to projecting into the international marketplace. So to be successful, however, a good website needs to be geared towards making it easier for international audiences to find what they want and contact the company for follow-on actions. Well, today we are pleased to have Joshua Erickson, who is a market research analyst with the Rural Export Center of the U.S. Department of Commerce. Joshua became a market research analyst in the Rural Export Center after having worked for 2 years as an export assistant with Heather Rank in the Commercial Service Office in Fargo, North Dakota. During his time as an export assistant, he helped develop trainings on international market research and website globalization, coordinate international visitor outreach for the Big Iron Farm Show, and of course, research international markets for U.S. companies. He's finishing up a master's degree in international agribusiness, having already graduated with an MBA from North Dakota State University. So without further delay, I'd like to pass the platform over to Joshua. Joshua?
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, thank you everyone for coming today. I'm going to be sharing about website globalization. And the presentation that we have prepared today covers various aspects of globalizing your website. It's designed to be a good start of how to globalize your website and give you the principles that you would need in order to understand what needs to happen with your website. And then obviously some of the details about web design and web development that might not be covered in this presentation, but it will be covered in conversations that you would have with your web developer. So first, I wanted to give an overview of the Rural Export Center. Within the International Trade Administration, which is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, there's the U.S. Commercial Service, which is all about helping exporters export to other countries. Part of the U.S. Commercial Service is the Rural Export Center, which is designed for market research and website globalization efforts for rural businesses across the United States. And as you can see here, part of the Rural Export Center is webinars and seminars, RAISE, that's the brand name of our market research, and then also website globalization review. Today's agenda will be covering the strategy that goes into website globalization. We'll look at domains and how international domains function. We'll look at search engine optimization as it applies to globalization and internationalization of your website. And we'll also provide some simple, easy to do, concrete enhancements that you can have in hand when you next update your website, as well as translation and principles of internationalization. So the first thing you have to realize is this is a very strategic endeavor. Why is your website so important? Here are some facts that we have. 60% of households worldwide have access to the internet. 76% of households use a smartphone. 75% research products online before visiting or buying. And if you have a website that isn't polished or isn't interactive enough, it's not up to the standard of the consumer, 38% will stop engaging if the website is not attractive. 39% will leave a slow website, and 44% will leave a website if it's not clear how they can get in contact with you, especially with when there's a product that you're advertising that you want to sell. If you're not providing an outlet or an option for a consumer to act upon their desire to interact, they will likely go somewhere else. So now more than ever, it's important to have a website that people can interact with and they can find appealing. With website globalization, I want to break it down so it's simple, easy to understand. It's just the process of making your website world ready. The goal is to make your website broadly applicable and accessible, both to and what ends up happening is that makes it accessible to domestic customers just as much as it does to international or global customers. The same principles apply. So this, when you increase interaction of your website on a global scale, the end goal is to increase sales, increase promotion, and get people familiar with your product and ultimately drive your bottom line forward. Globalization can be broken down into kind of phases, I would say. These phases include internationalization, regionalization, localization, and e-commerce is part of this as well. So the internationalization side is when you're making your website broadly applicable. And then as you are able to increase your efforts and you have the time and resources to devote to your website, you might focus on a specific region or language. So you say, oh, I'm going to set up a Spanish website, or I'm going to set up a Middle Eastern website or a South American website. And then once you get to a point where you have dedicated markets, and let's say you have a certain amount of revenue coming from your market in Chile, for example. And the kind of the rule of thumb there is when you have 5% or more revenue coming from 5% or more revenue and traffic coming from a certain market, you could begin to consider creating a website in that market. And that's localization. That's where you're creating a website specific for that region of a country or that country in general. And e-commerce obviously flows throughout this. So I'm going to show you a graph that kind of demonstrates from a time and energy standpoint and from a focus standpoint. So you start off with your current website, or maybe you're just barely starting to look into getting a website. That doesn't cost a lot of money. It's pretty simple to set up. You can reach a global audience really quickly. But as you customize and begin to tailor this to your audience, the time, effort, money, specialization, that all increases as you get to focus on one specific region or individual consumer groups within that country. So this applies both in a business-to-business setting and business-to-consumer setting. Obviously, with e-commerce, that's more business-to-consumer, B2C, but the same principles will apply in both of those settings. First, the basic principles are with a website are you have to make it simple and easy to understand. When a client comes to your website or a potential client comes to your website, the first things they see, as we saw on that earlier tab, the first things they see can turn them off to even visiting your website. And so being able to have a clear, easy to understand website with a clear value proposition. You have to show them why they can't afford to not do business with you. What are they missing out by not doing business with you? Show the value that you have and show why you're different. With any business setting, one of the main things that's key is being able to differentiate yourself. Unless you're selling a commodity, which is fine, but oftentimes when you're selling a commodity, you get into price wars, right? So you're competing based on price. Whoever has the lowest price wins. Most businesses are going to want to step away from that and try to focus on what makes them different, what makes them valuable, and why the consumer wants that. And then every website is going to have a call to action, a way for a potential customer to act on what they're seeing. When they see it, they see that they want it, they see that it's valuable, You have to have a contact form, a buy now button, watch a demo, something that gets them acting more. The more they act, the more they will invest in it, and the more valuable, the more value they'll derive from your website and from your company and product. Basic types of websites. So you have like a more informational website. The example here I have is TED websites. A company website might also be more informational if the company mainly deals in like personal sales, or the website's just there to kind of be an ad for them, not so much a place for the customer to actually start a transaction. You might have a transactional website. You have the opportunity to make a sale or make a purchase right there on the website. And then on online marketplaces like Amazon or eBay, where you don't have control over the website, but you do have the ability to sell through their platform. So their big name brings in the people, and then you're able to compete with other sellers on that marketplace for consumers' attention. So getting now kind of shifting into how the domain affects your website, what the domain looks like on an international level. The basic definition of a domain is the identification string. Think of it as your parking spot on the internet. So it defines your control, and very simply, it's the phrase that sits in between www and .com. That's your domain. If you have the entire URL, the domain is kind of a subset within that URL. So the URL would be the www.yourdomain.com. So I wanted to go through some different options you have, keeping in mind that when you go from globalization to localization, the effort and cost increases as you go from globalization to localization. So your current website might be www.tractorsinkansas.com. And you may even have an international sales page. This website is accessible to anyone around the globe, and it doesn't really signal a specific country, other than it probably signals the United States. But there are things you can do with your domain that can help signal that you are more available and more willing to interact in international business. One example would be to create what are called subfolders. A subfolder is where you put the /region or /language, and you'll see that this is one way to quickly turn a globalized website into a site that's dedicated to a specific region or language. One of the things that's nice about this is that all of the marketing and domain authority that you've acquired, the backlinks that you have to your website, all of your search engine optimization efforts, that will all go and flow into your current domain when you set it up in this subfolder way. Another way that you could set it up is through what's called a subdomain. So if you look down the second 2 points under internationalization, language.yourdomain or region.yourdomain.com. Now this is also part of your same domain, but it's not as good for the SEO. Sometimes subdomains can influence or kind of take away web traffic and domain authority from your domain versus a subfolder. So one example that I read about was a company that they put on their blog. Their blog was used to help generate traffic into their website. People would come to read an article, and then they would go into the website to buy something. And they moved the blog from a subfolder to a subdomain. And what happened was they lost a lot of their traffic and domain authority, and their SEO, the content that they had on their blog, was no longer strongly linked to their original domain. So that's something to consider if you want to kind of break it apart, so you don't want it as closely associated, then I would recommend the subdomain. For example, Disney, the movie company, they will use subdomains for some of their movies, I've noticed. So they have like cars.disney.com. So then all of the cars traffic goes through that domain, and it's not linked to the parent domain as strongly. And then when it comes to localization, you can have a specific country code. So you can have a new domain in that country with a country code. An example of this country code might be .ca for Canada or .cn for China. This strongly signals to the consumer that you are open for business in that country. You do have to buy a subdomain, or you have not a subdomain. You have to buy a domain in that country, just like you would here, through just a domain hosting website. But one of the tricks, or one of the concerns with that, is that becomes a brand new website, and so you'll have to rebuild the reputation of that website, essentially do the SEO from the ground up, and just tailor the whole website as if you were doing a whole website here. So if you do that, you'll be managing two websites, one in that country with that country code, and one in the United States with the United States.com ending. So that approach, while it's very beneficial, that's where I would recommend you have more traffic, more revenue from that country before you take that approach, because it would require more effort, and you'd essentially be managing and optimizing two websites at the same time, or multiple. Maybe you have multiple countries you're setting up in. And other ways that you can kind of focus on that localization level, once again, you can use the subfolder, yourdomain.com/country, or you can use the subdomain, country.yourdomain.com. So it just depends on what your purpose is, whether you choose a subfolder, a subdomain, or a country code domain. And it also depends on where you're at with your overall globalization efforts. For now, I think starting with yourdomain.com, making your website great, maybe adding maybe an international sales page, and then you can kind of branch out as you focus more on other markets. I will get into a little bit more about the international sales page and other details as we go along. So here's an example of that country code domain for Google. One point to make is that when you have a website in another country, or you're targeting another country, Google's domain in Hong Kong or China or Germany, Google has its own domain over there, and it's its own search engine. So one of the things that you'll need to do is relist your website with Google in Germany or with Google in China. You have to kind of list your website there, or kind of like register it. It's not like a formal registration process, but you can submit it to the website so that the Google search engine in Germany indexes your website, and then will use those results in the German Google more prominently, or at least it'll recognize it more prominently. And then you can also see here, when we're kind of comparing versus subdomains versus subfolders, subfolders would be considered, I would consider them to be a good option, because they're pretty easy to implement and they retain all the SEO into your own site. And subdomains, they're an acceptable option unless you want to specifically dissociate the content on the subdomain from your main domain. Then a subdomain would be a great option. So that's kind of how we break them down. And so now that we've just talked about the search engine optimization that gets passed on through when you have a subfolder, or not when you have a country code domain, let's talk more about search engine optimization. So this just means when you're looking at a search engine, you want your website to rank highly. You want your website to do well. And so you take efforts, strategic efforts, to make sure that your website ranks highly up in that area. And maybe you've heard, or maybe this feels like this is this really big deal that it's hard to do. You know, there are some tricks to it, but at the same time, I'll try to explain it in a way that's very simple, and it's something that anybody can do. Anybody with a website can engage in search engine optimization to benefit their website. So I wanted to give you kind of a map on a global scale of search engines. You may have never heard of some of these search engines, but search engines are different all around the world. Google is by far the 800-pound gorilla in the room, but in some countries, Google is not the #1 search engine. For example, in China, Baidu is the #1 search engine, and in South Korea, Naver is the most popular search engine. So understanding some of these nuances helps you when you're going to these markets, helps you tailor your website to other search engines. You know, you can list your website with those search engines so that they're indexed, and just helps you understand that consumers in other countries, they're coming at it from a different angle. You know, they have, whether it's a different search engine, a different browser, a different, you know, a different language or cultural background. There's a lot of different things that you would need to account for in order to like fully reach someone in a country. I thought this was a really good example of that principle I was sharing earlier. You want your website to rank up highly. So this is called a golden triangle. And this this image was an eye tracking study where they tracked consumers' eyes or people's eyes when they were looking at a computer. And they found that the upper left-hand corner of the screen received the most attention, where it's highlighted in red. And then as consumers' eyes, or you know, people who are looking at search results, as it went down the page, the attention got less and less. So here you can see the top 5 results, top 5 results received the most attention, and then a little bit on the right hand where there were the ads. But beyond that, you know, there's just not as much attention by far. So we really want to get on the first page, if possible, of a web search. So one way to get on the first page is through paid search placements, like AdWords. You can also buy keywords. So this is a way to get your company into the eyes of potential consumers. So you can see from Google's standpoint, Google has a variety of keywords that you can pay for to list your company as in ads, right? And so common keywords like SEO, there's a lot of people who might be competing on a keyword like SEO. But I will cover how you can compete for AdWords, or how you can have ads, you can generate ads and list ads for your company, for your website, without competing for some of these high paid AdWords. And this is, this is pretty straightforward information, but I'm starting at more basic level because I'm assuming that, all of us, we are working towards building a better globalized website. So I want to start with the basics and work our way through. So to know more about how SEO is going to benefit you, it helps to give a brief explanation of how the search engines do their work. They first start with the crawling phase, where they go out and they assess all of the internet, and they crawl the websites with their software and return the information. So they're not the information that they're collecting is just, in order for Google to do that, they have to have a lot of computing power, and they're just collecting the basic information. They're just getting enough to know what the website is about. It's not going to be able to understand the pictures or the graphics. It's just collecting the text, and oftentimes it's collecting text in certain spots on your website. And then that is stored in its index, and it's ranked using its algorithm. So Google will crawl all the websites, store the information, rank the information using its algorithm, and then when somebody searches, it returns the search results. And that's why Google can return the search results so fast, is because it's already stored, it's already ranked, and then it just has to call up the ranked list. But the ranking and the storing and the crawling is something that continuously happens. And so that's why, the changes that you make to your website, they will help you improve as you go along. But this concept of keywords. I brought up keywords earlier. I wanted to bring up long tail keywords. When this basically gets at the specificity of your product and the needs that you're meeting. We talked about how when you're looking at going international, you want to focus on what differentiates your business from the other businesses around you. So thinking of long tail keywords and also optimizing your website uses that same principle. If you have a word like shoes, it's a one-word phrase. There are tons of shoe companies out there. There's a lot of competition for that keyword, and it costs a lot if you were going to advertise based on just that keyword. However, the more specific you get, the less it costs. So if you go to men's shoes, the cost goes down. There's less competition. Nike women's running shoes. If you go down to maybe a specific type of grain silo, or are you using specific type of machine product? The words that you use or the phrase, by this time it's a whole phrase, that is something that can be pretty specific to your market niche. So the idea here is when you use a word like that, usually if someone's searching for something very specific, it's because they have a very specific need. So not only do people tend to engage more when they're searching for those specific words, they're more likely to look at your website, they're more likely to convert into a potential customer. But the cost of those of using those words in your advertising is less with Google. So this is a great way to improve your standing in your website, and do it strategically and also get better benefits by using these long tail keywords. And this, now that we've talked about the different search engines, but we're going to talk about the biggest one around the world, and that's Google. Because Google has some tools that are very useful for businesses, both, like we've already mentioned, the advertising, and there are other tools that can help businesses improve their online presence and globalize their presence. We're not sponsored by Google, but Google is one of the tools that's free or low cost in a lot of cases. There are other competitors out there. A great way to find competitors to Google is to search for Google ads, or search for one of Google's products, and one of Google's competitors is probably advertising or optimizing their search results to be right there next to it. So I wanted to talk about Google Analytics. This tool is your eyes and ears on your website. If you ever have, if you're ever making a change to your website, you say this change is better, and Google Analytics is your way to justify that it is really better, because what you'll see is it reports what people are doing on your website. Now, a lot of you probably have or are familiar with analytics for your website page. It's just something that you can add in at any time, to any of your websites. Google Analytics, it sets up, it's an account with Google, and then you add these little tags to different pages on your website, and it will track what's going on. So here you can see that you can get a real-time update, the number of users that have come through. It can track that versus the revenue. You can track how many people on your website go on to buy on your website. So if you look on the left-hand side here, it has kind of your dashboard. And if you choose audience, you can see it'll break it down by country. You can see it'll break it down by browser, by operating system. The number of sessions or visits that each user had and how long they were there. So this really helps you understand who your audience is. I've heard it said in the business community, you have an idea of who your customer market is, but sometimes your customer market is different, and that's usually because the customers see the value in your product for what they're seeing it for. And so understanding who your customer market is, that allows you to really understand why they're using it, what they're using it for, and when you connect with your customers better, you understand how to give them additional value, how to make additional sales to that customer base. It's just, marketing and sales online is just like, you can look at it just like you're going over, you're having conversation, maybe you're going out for lunch with someone, but it's a little, obviously you're doing it online, but you still have to get to know your customers. You have to get to know them via the data, via how they act on your website, instead of asking them directly what they like and what they don't like. So the way they react to what's on your website, that's how you get to know them. As I mentioned, you can see users by country. This is a great way when you're thinking about expanding to another country. You can come here and say, okay, well, who's visited our website the most? Who's made the most purchases? And a lot of this, especially on the purchase side, you would understand if people are coming to your website for purchases, then you would see that uptick from that country. But I want to give an example. I worked with a company that their brand name was the same as a soccer team in the country. So they had a lot of people coming into their website from that country who had been searching for the soccer team. And so I'm not sure how they would be able to capitalize on that, because their product didn't have anything to do with soccer. But it was interesting because they noticed that they would, through their analytics, that they were getting the visitors from that country. So you could choose, maybe let's say if you clicked on India and said, okay, well, let's see, what are customers from India doing on my website? And then you can see the flow of who goes where and at what time. So you can see in this page, 1,000 people from India visited. You could break it down so that you could see just for India, but this will show you, they came in first to the home page, most of them, then a certain number of them dropped off after visiting the home page. And you'd say, well, why did they drop off? Why didn't they stay and buy something? Or why didn't they look at my product chart? Or, so you can start to understand, if it's something on the home page, then maybe it's the way the home page is laid out, and you have to make it simpler or have a better call to action. But then as you get into like maybe a customer went from the home page to the store to the product page, and then maybe they didn't end up buying it, and maybe that's something that would help that you understand more about the consumer preference, because if they go to the store and actually look at the product, then they're that much closer to being a paying customer. So this user flow view is very helpful in the analytics side of things. Google also has a keyword planner. When we talked about keywords, using keywords to help improve your website search rankings. So Google will help you plan out keywords that fit with your business. You can search new keywords. You can come up with phrases and say, well, I think this phrase would be a good phrase, and search and see, what the percentage of of searches are, what the volume of searches are, about how much that keyword would cost you if you were to use it in your ads. You can also see things like the click-through rate. So click-through rate just refers to how many people are clicking on the ads related to that keyword and going to the actual website. So it'll actually project the cost for you, and you can do it by area. So in this case, you can see we've also included Canada, so you can see different countries. One of the things that I like about this is that you can set your budget. So you can say, oh, I would like to spend only this much. And then when that's done, I'm done. Or you can say, I only want to spend this much per click, and then let it run and see, like if you know how many clicks you need to get in order to get a customer, then you could kind of calculate the cost of your customers. So once again, this is, as we're going forward, these tools are very useful. These aren't the only tools out there, but a lot of them are pretty intuitive and free. If you're looking at hiring a web developer to do, or a web marketer to do this for you, these are concepts that will help you evaluate your web marketing and understand. You can ask them for an analytics page, and so then they provide the analytics to you updated, and it will help you understand what they're saying about your website. So I wanted to get into some of the simple enhancements. These are changes that you can make to your website today to help improve your SEO and to improve your internationalization. Most of them are pretty straightforward. For those of you who want to take these to your web developer, or maybe you want to consider them first, I'll present them. You can understand just some of the options. So the first one is a contact page. If you're interested in international business, having an international section in your contact page, that's one of the first steps I would suggest if you don't have it already. So you can see here on this website, they have an international page, and it has the address is fully spelled out. It has Kindred, North Dakota, USA. It's completely spelled out. In other countries, they might not understand our address format. So having it spelled out completely in the proper format, that's helpful for international pages. Also, the international telephone format. So the phone number is in an international format, and it's clearly labeled. This website has a little widget drop-down box up in the upper left where you can select different languages for the website. So, and I'll get into this more in translation when we talk about translation, but that's a pretty good option, low-cost option to show that you're interested in engaging with people from various countries. Obviously, when you have an international contact page, you'll want to make sure that you have the capacity to handle international inquiries from that page, from that country, or from that region. So understanding, how are we going to handle someone who only speaks Spanish, or someone who contacts us from China? You don't have to handle that. You just have to be able to understand that those situations may come up. So here's some more principles to follow with an international contact page, or any contact page. Having specific, clear contact information. Typically, having a personal email address or making it seem more approachable, that can be really helpful rather than just an info at. Now, your company might still choose to use the info at or sales at, but people tend to gravitate more towards contact options that make that remove barriers that allow them to contact easily, where they think they're going to get a good response. So a name, email address, Robert at the company, that can generate more interest. And once again, with your analytics, you can always do this test. One thing that you can do is set up what's called A/B testing. So you set up an A version of your website and a B version of your website. And when people come in from a search result, it can just switch them back and forth between A and B. And so you'll get half the people coming into A, half the people coming into B, and you'll see which one generates better like interaction from the customer, or better responses. And then you can choose that website over your previous iteration. Also, with the contact form, if you have a contact form instead of contact information, you'll want to make sure that you only ask for as much information as you need. So like a name and an email. If you want to verify ahead of time, you might say, country, or what product you want to sign up for. But generally speaking, the longer the forms are, the less people are going to fill them out. Here's another example from a website where you can see they have a drop-down box. Drop-downs are really convenient. They make it impossible to select the wrong option. But if it's information where it's more open and free-flowing, you have a text box there as a backup, so they can always add additional information. Having a zip or postal code, that's possible, but in a lot of countries there is not. So in this case, you can see they made it a required field. They're not going to be able to send it if they don't have a zip or postal code. So someone who's a little bit more entrepreneurial or innovative, they might put in a zip code just so they can get a message to you. But for some people, this might be where they drop off, because they don't have a zip code and it's required, and so they think, well, I can't figure it out, so I'll just go to another website. So little barriers like that can make a big difference when it comes to online inquiries. Another example here, they have state, they have phone and fax. I probably wouldn't necessarily think that fax is very relevant. In a lot of cases, you wouldn't need to know the fax first thing. You could get that later if you needed it. But once again, drop-down boxes help speed along the forms and help avoid incorrect or answers that are unintelligible. So on your website, do you use international formats for time zones? Do you use international formats for dates, weights, measures, electricity, whatever you're doing? If you're planning on selling to international customers, then you're going to want to have kilograms and meters and everything. Make it easy for them to understand. Make it easy for them to be a customer. Really think about how it looks through their eyes. If I go to a website and I'm not able to understand the date, and I don't understand the measures very well because I haven't studied up on metrics, then I might as well just go to a US website. And it'll be similar for other countries. They will want to make sure if it's easier for them to get engaged and it's things that they're comfortable and familiar with, then they'll be more likely to stay on your website and become a customer. Going into kind of the next part here with internationalization and localization aspects, like cultural aspects. So we've talked about, from a domain side, going from global to local, from a focus point, but from a cultural point, if you have an international website, it's more culturally neutral. But once you get into creating a website for that specific country, you'll want to make sure that you're tailoring every little detail to that culture and that language and that customer base. So an example that I have is colors. The color that you're using on your website can really influence. For example, in China, red with the Chinese New Year, symbolizes like good luck, triumph, fortune. But if you have a lot of red on your website and it's a Chinese website, it's not going to mean the same thing. It would be like us using a lot of red and green, like kind of like Christmas colors, and putting it on your website. And it's not going to come off the same way. So the colors that you're using can really make a difference. And once again, you can always test this using your A/B testing, creating a version of your website that has more red or more purple, or, and as an example, Amazon and other big websites have done this, and they've found that the button you click to push buy, they've tested different colors of that button, and the button that they have it as is the one that generates the most buy clicks. It seems silly, but consumers, if it's a different color, they can react to it differently, and they might not click buy as often if it's a green button instead of a gold button, or whatever it might be. So now, kind of getting into more of the translation. Here's some kind of humorous examples, but if you're translating your website, you want to be careful not to make these types of faux pas. So you'll always look better for people in that country if you have a clean translation. That means using a professional to help you translate. Now, I know that's a professional who is native speaker of that language, who also has familiarity with your product or your product industry. Now, that's not always possible, but that's kind of like the gold standard. And then kind of a beginning option would be to have a button on your website that says, choose a different language. Something like that will help them access your website, but they're not going to expect that everything's perfect because it's clear that Google is doing the translating. Kind of an intermediary step, you could use a professional translator to translate some of your landing pages, some of your initial pages, some of your marketing brochures, and then everything else is in English. I've seen companies do that, and that can really help draw people in, but you don't have to spend as much time and money up front translating in order to start drawing traffic from that specific market. So one of the things, so wrapping up this type of information, the website Globalization, through the US Commercial Service, there's a service called the Website Globalization Review. So we analyze your website using top-notch crawler tools and explain, what you need to do to help improve your website. And then you can get a report about what your website will do, how you can improve your website. The Rural Export Center offers these reports for $100 each, but if you just contact your local trade specialist, in Kansas, there's AJ Anderson, who's on the webinar. So this would be, your local trade specialist almost always offers this themselves. And if for some reason they don't, then you could come to us at the Rural Export Center. The Rural Export Center also offers research, rural research, like as I mentioned earlier, RAISE research, where you can get information about which markets would be useful for you. And once again, reaching out to your local trade specialist, and they'll determine whether or not this research is a good fit for you, and they can connect you with us. So that concludes my presentation today. Thank you very much, and we'll be open for questions in a little bit.
Well, thank you very much, Joshua. That was a really in-depth and informative session. Well, right now, we're fortunate to have local representation, as you already made mention of the U.S. Commercial Service in both Kansas City and Wichita. And now I'd like to introduce Mr. AJ Anderson, who's the director of the U.S. Commercial Service Wichita office, to tell you more about the ways that his office can help you connect with Joshua and the other resources that the U.S. Department of Commerce offers.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Yes, for those that do not know me or have never met me before, I'm AJ Anderson, and I am the Wichita Office Director for the U.S. Commercial Service. And Josh, that just did the presentation, he's one of my colleagues in what we call our Rural Export Center. I cover all industries from startups to the biggest companies in Kansas. Industry does not matter. And I cover about 2/3 of the state, pretty much all of central Kansas and western Kansas. My colleague that's on with us today, Josh, he is the director of our Kansas City office, and he and his staff cover pretty much the eastern third of Kansas and into parts of Missouri. We are the lead federal government agency tasked with helping U.S. companies to export more. So if you're looking to expand in an existing foreign market or enter new foreign markets, and you need to establish reps or distributors, the Kansas City office and myself here in the Wichita office, we try to help you with that. Mostly helping find reps and distributors, utilizing our colleagues overseas in U.S. embassies and consulates. In addition, we help with other things such as connecting you with pre and post export financing through our colleagues at SBA and Ex-Im Bank. They can also go ahead and provide exporting insurance for foreign receivables. We can go ahead and help with country information, industry information overseas, help you vet a potential distributor that you've already identified in a foreign market, help with things that get stuck in foreign customs, overdue payments, things like that. Basically anything to try to help you export more. And that includes things like the website Globalization and our RACE service through the Rural Export Center. So whether you're a rural company or someone located in Kansas City or Wichita, we would be happy to go ahead and try to help you increase your exports. And that's kind of a nutshell of who we are and what we do. So I'll turn it back to you, Jeff.
Thank you, AJ. I must say that we work very closely with both the Kansas City and the Wichita office. So we will be happy to work collaboratively with any company here who wishes to take advantage of the kinds of services that the Department of Commerce, U.S. Department of Commerce offers, as well as the kinds of tools and services that we offer here at the Kansas Department of Commerce. And in that regard, I would now like to introduce you to Mr. Chan Liu, my colleague here at the Kansas Department of Commerce, who will talk about the ways that our department can assist you with pursuing website globalization. He'll also talk about some of the other international export promotion tools we have that can help you increase your international sales. And so, Mr. Liu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for the great introduction, and thank you to all my all the presenters before me. You did a great job and very, very informative. Now I am going to encourage everybody, please submit your questions using the online Q&A option. This is a great opportunity to get your questions answered. Now I'm going to talk about what can we do to help you pay for the services you just heard. Could someone start my PowerPoint, please? All right, thank you. This is a page we specifically designed to test your eyesight. So I made the font as small as possible. Anyway, the 4 quadrants symbolize the activities and services we provide at the Department of Commerce International Division. But today we're going to focus on the bottom left quadrant. We call it marketing support. Now there are 3 programs in there. The information Joshua provided at the end, he mentioned a website assessment service. For that one, we have 2 programs you can use to pay for it. The first one is actually listed at the bottom, State Trade Expansion Program STEP. And the other one potentially you can use is the second one listed. It's called Kansas International Marketing Assistance Program KITMAP. Now I will go into details on those 2 programs. Now keep this in mind. I know today we're only talking about website, but we cover lots of different things. For example, the first one listed there, Kansas International Trade Show Assistance Program, KITMAP. That one is one of our most popular programs. we can give you up to $3,500 or half of the actual cost for you to exhibit at a foreign trade show for the first time or introducing a new product. Because of COVID, we also included virtual trade shows now. If there's one you're planning on attending, please let us know so we can provide financial assistance to help you offset the cost. And some of the stuff AJ mentioned, market research, business partner search, single company promotion, all of those, there's more than likely a fee associated with that. And with our STAT program, we can pay for all of it. So without further ado, let me start with the STAT program first. State Trade Expansion Program. It is a federal program. Money came through the SBA. So if we have any SBA representatives on the conference today, thank you so much for the money. So the SBA will give us a portion and the state will provide a match, and is dedicated to small, medium-sized companies who is new to export or starting to export. Or if you're interested in expanding to additional markets, you'll be eligible as well, as long as you meet the small, medium-sized requirements. Your product is made in Kansas or value added in Kansas, and then you're in business for not less than 1 year. If those are all true, then you're eligible to apply. We ask you to apply and get approved first before you conduct the activity. Once in a while, I will get a mystery invoice either in my email box or just a piece of paper mailed to me. So I have to figure out who is it from and why are you sending me an invoice? That most likely will not work. So please keep in mind, apply first and get approved before you pay for the activity or conduct the activity. Now, under the STAT program, we can support 3 groups of activities. Now that includes export training, trade shows and missions, and market interest support. The export training component is very self-explanatory. Activities that's export oriented, and it's a training activity. Now, one of the greatest one I'm aware of is called Riddle of the Exporter program. It's put together by the Kansas Small Business Development Center, KSBDC. I believe we do have a couple of folks from there on the call today. It is a 1-day program. They give you a 30,000 feet overview of the entire export process. We start with how do you identify a market? How do you find business partners? And then how do you get paid? How do you ship your product? And then end with how do you deal with cross-cultural communication issues? So it's a very comprehensive overview. If you're new, this will be a great introductory course. If you're seasoned, this is the perfect refreshment. So I would encourage everybody to look it up. Now, under the trade show and mission parts, we typically will send a couple of trade mission groups out. Some of them will be industry focused, for example, aviation delegation, a bioscience delegation, or country specific, or maybe a Kansas trade mission to Southeast Asia, Kansas trade mission to Mexico. Now with COVID, for now we have not done any physical mission, but we're planning on it in the future, and we're also looking at digital trade mission as well. So if you have any interest, please feel free to contact me. The third group I mentioned is called Market Interest Support, and that includes a variety of things such as website development. That's exactly what Josh talked about today. We can pay for translation, marketing material translation, product label translation, or product catalog translation. Those are things we can help with. We can also pay for some of the activities AJ mentioned, partner search, research, credit report, single company promotion. So there is help available. Specific dollar value, we're a little bit short on time, so I'm not going to jump into each of those detailed programs. Typically, we would like to do all we can to help you, so we're aiming to help you 100% within a certain limit, where it's a small pie and we're trying to get everybody a piece. So again, if you have something you think you might want to do, please make sure that you let me know as soon as possible. Now the STEP program is an annual program. We have to apply with all 50 states plus territory and compete for the money. So we don't know what's our future funding situation will be like. So again, apply as early as possible, and there's no application deadlines. Rolling admission, first come, first serve. We still have some money left between now and September. September is when the program ends. So you still have a couple of months. I would encourage you to apply. The other program listed there is the KITMAT program, Kansas International Marketing Assistance Program. Now that is a relatively new program we put together. I think a good way to look at it is it's a catch-all program. If the program activity you want to participate does not meet STEP requirement, and it's not a trade show, then we can look at using the KITMAT program to help you. With the KITMAT program, it covers a total of 13 eligible marketing activities. And then we can reimburse 50% of your cost, up to $5,000 per company per year. So that's in a nutshell what our KITMAP program is. Again, we talked about 3. KITSAP, that's trade show. KITMAP is up to $5,000 or half of the cost for the full year. And then the STEP program, training, trade shows, mission, marketing support. So now we learned about the lower left quadrant of the pie chart. You know, I probably should design this design this slide before I hear Joshua's presentation, after I hear his presentation, so I can move that to the top left corner, the golden triangle part. But anyway, that's mine. I do have a couple of questions here. So let me read that through. First one is most of our clients are small business that do not have IT or marketing departments to oversee the website. Where can a business discover reputable and knowledgeable vendors to assist with the web? Joshua, this is a question for you.
Yes, so the U.S. Commercial Service has, they do have a list of e-commerce service providers and web marketing companies, web development teams. So I've provided the link in the chat. You know, if for some reason you're unable to see it, just let one of us know on this call and we'll be able to send it your way. That's a great place to start. You know, I'm sure there are website developers in your local region. My advice would be to find one that has experience in your industry and then you know, evaluate them the same way you would any other business service, by their reviews or by a recommendation. And then, but truly any web developer or web marketer could be helpful, you know, as long as they're able to, or willing and able to learn about your industry and the specifics of your company.
Thank you, Joshua. I don't really see any other questions right now. I do have just one for myself. The website evaluation services you mentioned earlier, how long does that take from the day I submit an application? Does it take a couple of weeks, couple of months? What's the time frame I should expect?
That's a great question. It kind of depends on what your local office is doing. So as AJ, when he came on and talked about his office there or the Kansas City office, I would say, you know, it's probably a couple of weeks is about what it would take, a week to 2 weeks. But, you know, you can get an up-to-date estimate from your local office when you reach out with the application.
Great, thank you so much. Again, I don't see any additional questions. So I think we're going to end it now. It has been very informative. Thank you so much for everybody's participation, your time to join us today. Like Jeff mentioned earlier, the presentation and the whole session has been recorded and will be available on YouTube for you to review. Thank you so much for your time. Please stay tuned for our future program announcement. Thank you.